My name is Dave Slamp, and I am enrichment speaker for you. My assignment is to bring the stories behind the scenes alive, to draw out of history the details, some of the facts, some of the information that we don't often hear. Fortunately, Pliny the Younger wrote about the story, the event, some other things, not just the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, but wrote about some of the things that he and his uncle had experienced. So we have a really good historical record from that time of what took place. When you think about Pompeii, I often think of the scenes in my life that have made a dramatic impact on me, the scenes that you never forget. They are the times, they are the places where you go and there is a quietness that settles over a crowd that is there. My wife and I experienced this when we went to the slave castles in the Ivory Coast, in Côte d'Ivoire, in West Africa. And as people go through the site, there's a quietness, there's a stillness as we reflect on what happened there, in this case, obviously a tragedy. The same thing we have observed and felt when we stood around with thousands of people at the footprint of the Twin Towers and remembered what had happened in that tragic day. Just this week, many of us have crossed the Bridge of Sighs, and you probably remember, as we noticed, that as we walked across, the crowd began to be very quiet as we contemplated, we thought about what it must have been like to look out those windows at Venice for the last time as a prisoner was marching, sometimes to their death, other times to their imprisonment. So we're going to talk about Pompeii, and it is one of those places. It's one of those sites that really makes an impact on our spirit. It will hopefully be a place, a time that you'll never forget, but also a time and a place that will make a lasting impact on our spirit. So with that, we step ahead. We go to Pompeii. Maybe that will give you a sense of this city that was the site of disaster. Probably no disaster in history has left more of a dramatic impact than of the trauma and the utter anguish than on human life than the destruction of Pompeii. A story that is frozen in time. Now, today we're going to look at this in depth and to see the story behind the story, if you will. The eruption of Mount Vesuvius, August 24 in 79 AD, took thousands of lives of the some 20,000 residents of Pompeii and Herculaneum. Now, Pompeii is today perhaps the most visited city of antiquity. It averages over 2.5 million visitors every year. Also, on the southwestern coast of Italy is the location for the city. It is southeast of Naples, on the Bay of Naples, and only 9 miles from Mount Vesuvius. We're going to approach it, of course, traveling through the dramatic port of Naples with its grand waterfront, its beautiful Italian architecture, and the dramatic St. Elmo fort. So let's take an imaginary walk back into time to the 1st century AD. We'll see a thriving major city, a port city, and a resort city, bustling with shoppers and exporters, alive with trade. By the way, does anyone here happen to be from San Diego, California? Are you? Okay, you are. All right. We lived there for 6 years. Wonderful place. And I often think of Pompeii similar to San Diego in location and weather, trade, and so on. It was a thriving port city like San Diego, nestled along a beautiful coastal region naval harbor and served as a major vacation resort spot. The area was also fertile, provided 3 grain crops every year. The mountains to the west nourished literally thousands of sheep in many flocks. The wood and the olives and the grapes of the area were processed, and they left the region as cloth and oil and wine. The shoreline hosts to a splendid country homes. The most powerful people in the world included emperors, court personages, and Roman aristocracy. The city was initially inhabited about the 8th century BC by Greek settlers. Rome took control beginning in the 4th century, and Pompeii was under Roman influence in 290 BC. Roman general Sulla took the final control of the entire region in about 89 BC. But August of 79 AD, Pompeii suffered such utter devastation, it was completely abandoned. The flows of ash and pumice fell for up to 3 months, history says, and finally about 10 feet of ash choked the city entirely. The life of Pompeii became a story frozen in time. For nearly 1,700 years, Pompeii was a forgotten city. We know much about it today, but that is due to more recent archaeological excavation, not that the city has been available for centuries. A few more things about the city. Pompeii's 20,000 residents, half of them were children. The average Pompeian woman stood at about 4.5 feet tall. She lived to about age 39. Men were a few inches taller and could expect to live to about 41. The stone streets of Pompeii are some of the most interesting. There was a system of sidewalks throughout the city, and they were designed to allow chariot wheels to cross the crosswalks. And yet they were elevated to keep pedestrians above the water or mud, perhaps the garbage that lay in the streets. It was a first-century crosswalk, if you will. Some homes were owned by aristocrats and elaborate, and they were elegant. Gorgeous courtyard gardens decorated with frescoes of plants and flowers. The rooms, interestingly enough, in these elaborate homes were heated by hot air running through cavity walls and spaces under the floors, while sophisticated hydraulic pumps literally provided running water through lead pipes such as these. A huge reservoir provided water to the city that flowed through underground pipes into aqueducts built by Agrippa in 20 BC. That aqueduct fed more than 25 street fountains like this one, at least 4 public baths, and scores of homes.